The following show is intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome back. Coffee with the Johns. Hello, everybody. Good morning.
Episode 235.
235?
I don't know. I just made that number up.
Season 2, episode 30. Friday the 13th.
I mean, I was kind of close to just throwing random numbers out there. 235.
Yeah, I mean you're tired. Once the coffee kicks in, John will make a little bit more sense. But we got a lot to cover today. I mean, there's some cool real estate articles and news that we are going to talk about and expand on. But more than anything, we're going to be talking about this new Delta variant and how it's going to be affecting your business, where you invest, how you invest, what types of properties you buy, where people are going to be going. I mean, this is nuts. This is getting crazy. It's going to cost some.
It seems like it really escalated just like the last week.
It's going to cause, I think, some serious civil unrest that we're going to be experiencing soon. So stay tuned for that. We're also going to be talking about the new infrastructure plan, the $3.5 trillion one. They also, from what I believe, they were already passed, or it's in Congress, the $1.5 trillion one.
1.2 is the one they've actually, the bipartisan one that they just passed. They're sending over to the House. The House now, Nancy Pelosi said, I am not taking up a single infrastructure bill until the second one is now passed through the Senate. And that's the $3.5 trillion one that has actually got quite a few problems to where even several Democratic senators are like, yeah, no.
So we're going to cover that and how that affects real estate, how that affects your business, how inflation is affecting the way people are hiring and food costs and everything. So there's a lot going on in the market, a lot for you to understand and know the trends that are developing, especially as you decide to invest. If you are deciding to make a move or invest out of state, which I recommend a lot of people do depending on where you live. So with that being said, welcome to the show, John Barr. How's it going, sir? Doing good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our house is getting built.
Yes.
I'm kind of excited about that.
It's rocking and rolling. The rain kind of let up a little bit, even though I'm seeing that I think this weekend or early next week, we're supposed to get a lot more rain. So hopefully.
Hey, as long as I get the decking on before that happens, they're working through the weekend to put it on. So I was like,
that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I was just kind of like, I had everything scheduled out to deliver Monday. And they're like, can we work this weekend? I was like, yeah. And I was like,
good, yeah.
I was like,
of course.
Shit, how am I going to get all that material? I need like 150 sheets of plywood. I was like, I can't. So I was like, well, I guess I'm making 4 trips with my truck and just driving it back and forth.
Oh, it's actually
Saturday
funny.
Morning.
I need 140 sheets of plywood. You saw that post I sent you. There's people on Facebook everywhere selling stacks and stacks of plywood, like piles of plywood they're selling. And I was like, man, I wonder how many people just ordered plywood thinking, oh, this is going to go through to the moon, and I'm going to sell it.
I just love how some people that is their investment strategy. Yeah. I'm going to buy plywood. But when you talk about getting in the stock market as a proven long-term track record of actually making money, like, oh, no, that's too risky. That's all fake. That's all manipulated. If you look at
it, that's where we are right now, though. I mean, everything is speculation. Everything is fast money. Everything is like, how can I buy this and turn it for this really fast and without much work and without doing anything. And it's like, yeah, all those strategies, they could pay out big or you could bust. Yeah. And I've been seeing these stacks of plywood. Some of them are saying $30 a sheet or best offer. I was like, oh, what price did you buy them at?
I'm curious because now I can buy a plywood for about $23.
At Home Depot?
Yeah, I had one of our framers said, hey, my vendor just came out and said he got 7/16 plywood for $23 a sheet. It's like, I can buy it brand new for $23 a sheet.
That's insane.
There's no reason for me to.
No, not at all.
You said that hey, they're selling it at 20. It's like, I'd rather pay $1 more to get brand new.
At $30 a sheet. It was at $30 a sheet what he was selling it. So that's why, because when I sent it to you, you had sent me also that OBS had dropped another $10. I was like, even then, this is more expensive. What? OBS? No.
OSB.
Sorry.
There you go.
OBS is what we use.
I was like, OBS.
Okay. So I got a little dyslexic with the letters. But yeah, I mean, it's really crazy what's happening. And we're going to talk about also, more material shortages. What we've been talking about for the longest time is how things connect, right? I mean, a lot of people are always looking at what they see right now, and it's like what comes behind it is what really matters. All the shortages that this problem right here in the front is going to cost in the back end, and it's usually much greater, right? So I mean, we're seeing that with car prices, we're seeing that with materials of all sorts, medical equipment. I mean, it's all across the board. With that being said, we have real estate, we have the Delta variant, we have inflation, we have the infrastructure bill. Where do you want to start?
Like first thing I want to address Tommy here's his idea. Like plywood is a cash business, pure profit. Write off the expenses and pocket the cash. I mean, I guess there's one way to do it. You write it off at 30 and then you sell it at 25. And yeah, you get the cash in your pocket, then you get write off. It's kind of a wash because then you get write off the expenses.
You can write off the expense, but you still need to make money that year.
Yeah, as long as you're profitable.
So, you still need to be profitable somewhere else.
yeah, for sure. So
what are we doing? Real estate, infrastructure, Delta variant. What are we doing?
I like starting with real estate because that's what I dream about every single night. And do all day.
And go.
Okay, so we all know the rental market, the housing shortages and stuff like that, and there's a couple reasons. People are always like, "Oh, we've had some people comment in here saying like, "Oh, it's those big institutional buyers. That's who's bidding up these prices and stuff." So I got two articles on one on the rental market and one on Wall Street getting into the housing market. So first we'll go with rental bidding wars heating up as the economy improves in a tight housing market. So we haven't gotten to a bidding war yet for any of our properties, but we have significantly increased rents on houses that somebody bought a house, moved out of, and it went up for rent again. I didn't jack the rent up on somebody. It's like, hey, tenant bought a house, they ended their lease, so I'm going to see what I can get for rent. And we got $475 more this year than we did last year for the exact same house. So they are usually reserved for home buyers, but bidding wars are becoming more common in the rental home market. Demand for apartments and single-family rentals is surging and outpacing supply. As the economy improves, workers are moving out of shared living situations and looking for their own homes. In addition, the housing market is so expensive right now that many would-be buyers are being priced out. That has them looking for rentals. The rental applications that we're getting right now, we're seeing higher credit scores. We're seeing applicants willing to put down more in terms of security deposits. We're seeing strong rental history as well. That wasn't necessarily the case pre-COVID. Matt Van Sickle moved to New York City this weekend to start a new job. He toured about 15 apartments in 2 days after searching on apps like Easy Street. He saw prices in the units he was looking for go up $300 to $400 in just over 2 to 3 months' time. In July, rents nationally rose 7% year over year from one-bedroom apartments and 8.7% for two-bedroom apartments. This is up from 5 and 6.5% annual gains in June, according to Zumper, a national listing rental platform. Strong job and income growth, as well as fierce competition for sale housing, is fueling demand for single-family rentals. Molly Bussell, principal economist at CoreLogic, said in a release. Boisel said she expects these factors to continue to drive the market this year, especially in and around cities and technology hubs as people start to return to offices. The coronavirus pandemic eviction moratorium, recently extended, is also playing into the supply situation, as some landlords are unable to evict tenants who aren't paying. They have less supply to offer those who can pay. To offset losses, some are raising rents on the properties they can, knowing that demand in the market will support the increases. Yeah. Thoughts?
I completely agree. I mean, it's what we talked about before. This is because of the shortage of housing and everything that's going on, and the increase in home prices and everything. It's in the lack of affordability of a lot of these homes. People are getting bid out left and right. We're becoming even more of a renter nation, where it's like, what else is there? What else can people do? You know, you need a home, you need a place to go. Yeah. And then I believe that, again, like what we're going to be talking about moving forward of this new variant that's happening, all these things that we're seeing, it's going to cause more fear from people of kind of like, you know, oh crap, is this 2020 again? And they're going to maybe get ahead of themselves anticipating certain things. So we might see a shift in that as well, of people being desperate, saying, let me get the hell out of an apartment and get a house, because, you know, if this thing hits again, I don't want to be stuck in an apartment in another shutdown. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think these are trends that we're seeing and that I think we're going to most definitely keep seeing. Buy and hold, we said at the beginning of this, buy and hold is always the way to go. And this proves it more and more.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we have such shortage of housing. We're like 4 million homes short. And then I think this next article talks about.
We're up to we were, I think, over 1 million before the pandemic hit.
No, we were over 1 million coming out of the Great Recession, like still like coming out of a recession,
right.
With millions of homes, like 1 million homes short.
Yeah,
and then now it's like it's only increased, and now it's even more
insane.
Fuel to the fire of the whole ordeal. So I do have this other article, and it's a bit lengthy, but there was a lot to it. And it says Wall Street isn't to blame for the chaotic housing market, and I've heard this several times. Everyone wants to get in there, blame Wall Street, blame these private equities, blame the hedge funds. Like they're the reasons that housing prices are so high. They're buying up all the homes and they're competing with everything. And that's just not true. They are a very, very, very small portion of the overall housing stock. I don't remember the statistic. It was on a different website I heard, but the majority of like all the homes that are owned by landlords, like 95% of them are owned by individuals that own 5 or less homes.
Yep.
And it's just like, there's just not that many. The numbers do not come anywhere close to thinking that the private equity firms are holding on all these homes.
It's what Warren Buffett had mentioned, I don't know how many years ago. He says, if there was a way to pick up thousands of single-family homes, he's like, I would in the drop of a dime. You know, he wants to get into single-family investing. The problem is, like, for somebody like Warren Buffett, buying a few houses isn't enough. He needs to buy, pretty much a few cities, to make it worth his time and his value and everything. And they're like, that's just not effective. It's not efficient. There's no real way of doing that with very little risk that like he would like to invest. So yeah, I mean, it's not the big institutions.
Yeah. So the article starts with housing prices have yanked the dream of home ownership out of the desperate clutching hands of millions. Countless tenants don't even have that dream, chafing under the increasing rent burdens that they are forced to bear. Some people are furious over reports that institutional investors, often private equity firms, are increasing the demand for housing and pushing prices upward. The Wall Street Journal wrote earlier this year that yield-chasing investors are snapping up single-family houses and competing with ordinary Americans, making all Marketplace reported the same, noting one buyer that had been outbid 6 times by all cash offers. Inman writes that customers are increasingly competing against institutional investors, and the real deal goes further, claiming that one of the main reasons for skyrocketing prices are actually a huge buying spree from institutional investors. So somebody's putting articles out there saying it's like, oh, it's these big institutional investors. They're trying to headline readers are getting people riled up and fired up. It's like the math still doesn't, and that's why I like this article. It kind of gave both sides of the, not argument, this is like where this is coming from, is people putting out there saying, oh, it's these institutional buyers are driving up this housing, trying to put blame on somebody. It's important to understand that institutional investors play a small role in the American housing market. While there are big firms for apartments and other multifamily housing units, there traditionally hasn't been the same level of investment in single-family homes. And the main reason it has become so profitable in the pre-existing housing shortage created by local governments and certain homeowners seeking to block new homes from being built, leading to a nearly 4 million home shortage nationwide. So that's what's driving these issues. It's like local governments and people fighting new housing developments. What's that they call them, like the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard people, like, oh, you can build houses, but just not in my backyard. And then they complain about housing prices, say it's developers and everybody.
No, it's the developers. You're lying.
So, however, the idea that institutional investors are somehow largely to blame for the current housing market catastrophe is wrong and obscures the real problem. Housing prices have been skyrocketing due to historically low supply, low mortgage rates, and the largest generation in American history entering the market looking for starter homes. But pre-COVID-19 research shows that institutional investors were still very small players. Mary reported that by 2016, private equity firms had acquired more than 200,000 homes, a fraction of the total number in America. A 2018 research paper notes that these investors accounted for less than 1% of all single-family housing rentals across the United States. 1%.
Yeah.
There's a lot of existing research that indicates institutional investors are a very small share of the investor pool. Goodman cites research released earlier this year that found that institutional operators own just 300,000 single-family units in 2019. For context, the research points out that there are roughly 15 million one-unit detached single-family rentals. There are roughly 80 million detached single-family homes in the United States. So they own 300,000 homes out of 15 million rental properties. So it's like when anybody says that,
they're
it's like
definitely the problem.
Yeah, it's like that's 2%. And they own 2% of homes. Like, you can't tell me that they're the ones driving the problem. But they got to have somebody to blame. Local governments will never take the blame. There's like, oh, it's these institutional investors. Oh, it's the developers. Oh, it's these people. It's we're not doing. We don't control policies and laws that dictate this stuff.
What's the danger of what you just said is that I was actually watching a show. Damn it, I can't remember that comedian, politician, political commentator. What's his name? Bill Maher. Bill Maher, I think. He's on HBO.
It's not Bill Burr.
No. Well, he's another one, but he's just anyway. But he had on Ben Shapiro, and Ben Shapiro, we all know, is a very strong conservative with very opinionated guy and fast talker, and will beat you down with a ton of facts, whether they're facts that you like or not. I mean, they're still stats. One thing that I noticed and that I pointed out to Val was that you listen to the crowd and they clapped for, let's say, the pro-mask the same way they clapped for the anti-mask, the same way they clapped for, pro-rights against anti-rights and all this. Like they go wherever the flow goes, right? So when you mentioned how this is headline reading, that's more than enough to get things going. Because the majority of the people, because they read these headlines, and it's like, well, it's on this newspaper, so it's got to be true, and everybody reads this newspaper, and everybody's reading these headlines. Did you see that headline? And, it's these institutional investors. I completely agree. They're those greedy investors. But nobody takes the minute to actually say, what is my actual thought on this? How about I dig a little deeper and look at the stats, look at the numbers?
Oh, because you'll find that stuff anywhere. It isn't hard. Like hard. How many investors own single family homes, and it's not like you can lie about that number. No. It's like even if you add an extra 3 million out of 15 million, it's like they're still not the majority by a long shot.
Even if you're an investor, right, and you have access to, let's say, like a software like PropStream or anywhere else you get your list, search institutional investors and see how many of them pop up and how many homes they own in the areas that you're looking at. You're going to see, like we've seen, because that was one thing that we did is when we were looking for absentee and everything, we started weeding out the institutional investors, and we saw like the numbers went down barely anything. It is like, okay, so it's not that many. The majority are owned by people that own, 2 to 5 homes. Like that's about it.
Well, most people, like the majority of them, I would bet, like is 2 homeowners. It's like they lived in a house, they moved into a new house, and kept an old one as a rental property. Yeah, that's most. That's how most people become landlords, and they only do it once, maybe twice.
Yeah, if you want to see a real drop on those numbers, look for somebody that has anywhere from 3 to 5 properties, and you'll see that number tremendously shrink, because the majority of them have 1 extra property, maybe 2. You know what I mean? And that's it. So, yeah, I mean, again, going back to the same thing, there's a lot of times, how many times do we put an article on? Because we just go through some of these media platforms and we see a headline or something, we throw it in, and then we take time to actually read them and see what it is. How many times does our list just shrink the hell down? Because once you start reading, you're like, there's absolutely nothing here. When you look at the data, it's like, no, that's, the title is this. And when you read the body, it's like, no. And that's, I can't remember where I heard it, but they're like, the person that writes the content is not the same person that writes the title. The person that writes the title writes for it to sell, not necessarily for it to reflect the content. You know what I mean? So I was like, yeah, I mean, there's a huge disconnect. So if you're headline readers, you're doing yourself a huge disservice because you're reading into all the wrong data and all the wrong things. But so I do have a real estate article, but I want to tie it in later because it ties in very nicely when we start talking about inflation and everything like that. But I did want to get into the whole case for the that's happening right now that we're seeing with the Delta variant, with everything that's happening. We're seeing like this is going to be very problematic for investors, depending on where you live. So we're going to start here in Texas. We have the Bexar County Civil District Court judge granted the city and Bexar County's request for a temporary restraining order against Abbott's executive order banning mask mandates in schools. So we talked about this before. Governor Abbott came out and did an executive order that people cannot municipalities, government buildings, schools, all that, you cannot force people to wear masks. You know, business owners have the right to choose, but any government building, anything like that, they couldn't mandate it. They couldn't force it. Well, now that's what Bexar County did. They did a temporary restraining order. Every time I hear that, I always hear of delaying a foreclosure. You know, when you use that to delay a foreclosure.
Temporary restraining order from the bank.
We've used those a lot. But anyway, effectively, the ruling allows Bexar County and San Antonio officials to issue a mask mandate in public schools and other guidance like quarantine protocol for now. Officials say they plan to have an order issued by the end of Tuesday. No details have been released yet on the guidance, but officials will hold a live press conference at 6:10 p.m. Okay, not 6 p.m., 6:10. Like such an arbitrary number. But anyway, with the ruling, the city and county will immediately issue an order requiring masks in public schools and requiring quarantine if any unvaccinated student is determined to be in close contact with a COVID-19 positive individual. According to a news release, according to documents presented in court, they will also require face masks for employees of Bexar County and San Antonio and visitors to city and county facilities. So Kimberly Goodall, an assistant Texas attorney general, said that a temporary restraining order will effectively undo state law. Not only are they asking this court to overthrow an executive order that carries the force and effect of state law, they are asking this court to throw out parts of the Texas Disaster Act that were passed by legislature. So we have Governor Abbott came out with an executive order. Now Bexar County is saying, no, we're not going to abide by that. You know, they filed temporary restraining order, and for the schools already notified the parents and everything. They're like, hey, schools are masks are back. Everything is back. We're going back to what we were doing before. So for all intents and purposes, 2020 has continued. You know, nothing has changed. Nothing has been going on. And we're seeing such a much bigger divide amongst the people now, you know, because we're seeing the people that don't want to get vaccinated, believe all the, you know, they're done with wearing masks, they're done with all this, and all the people that have been getting vaccinated want to wear masks and feel like their life is in danger. So this is causing a lot of instability, insecurity, and we're seeing it here in Texas, where now this started with Dallas, it's going to San Antonio, and then we have Schertz-Cibolo, which for those of you that don't know is, you know, what would you call that? Like a submarket of San Antonio?
Yeah, it's just another small municipality, but it's all, you type in a zip code of San Antonio, even though it's Schertz, it's going to jump you there.
Right.
Because like
it's all
every major city's got its own little suburbs inside.
So we have Schertz-Cibolo, which for those of you who may not know, it's on the 35 corridor heading towards Austin. So really good area for real estate. And Schertz-Cibolo-Universal City Independent School District is one such district where guidelines aren't as clear-cut, said the superintendent, as it is in other areas with mandating masks. Of the 17 campuses that are located there, 15 are in Guadalupe County, with 2 of them being in Bexar County. And he says, it is our belief that all of the school districts here, facilities, must follow the governor's executive order prohibiting schools from mandating face coverings. That means there will be no mask mandates for students, staff, or visitors to any of the district's 17 campuses, so including the 2 Bexar County campuses.
So the 2 in Bexar County are really stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're saying, we're going to follow the governor, but then there's a mask mandate for Bexar County for school districts, which these 2 are located in.
It seems like it's based on the superintendent. The superintendent is the one that has to dictate, not the school itself. So, it seems like it's whoever the superintendent is, they're the ones that, if in that case, apparently they weigh more than maybe what the restraining order is. I don't know. So it seems like, but my point with all this is that, and please, for everybody listening, this is not to get political. I am not trying to get political. This doesn't matter which side of the aisle you are. We're talking purely business, purely investing. You got to understand that you have people that are divided and very emotionally divided in this regard, right? So when you're seeing Bexar County enforcing all this, and then you're seeing these submarkets like Schertz-Cibolo, I've heard Helotes, the same thing, that they're like, nah, these smaller areas near a city, they're like, no, we're not going to enforce those things.
Near the city, like they are the city. Well, I mean, it's like there is no dividing line between Schertz-Cibolo. It's like
it's not like you're driving a good 10 miles before you hit it. Like it's
not like driving into Braunfels. It's like, nope, you are Schertz-Cibolo, Live Oak. Run all Universal City, Converse. They're all just one giant conglomerate over there.
But what I'm saying is that these places are starting to, I don't know if I wouldn't use the word rebel. It doesn't matter what word you use, but they're not enforcing it. These are enforcing it. So you got to think to yourself, when parents are making a decision of, where am I going to buy a house? Where am I going to rent? Because I want my kids to go to school and all this. This is going to be a huge deciding factor when it's like, do I want to be in Bexar County where they're doing masks? Or do I want to be in Schertz-Cibolo where they're not doing masks? So depending on how the parents fall within their belief of, their fear of COVID and all of this, right or wrong, doesn't matter. Where is that going to pull people to? And that's going to affect real estate everywhere, because that's going to affect where are people buying houses, where are people renting houses.
You just look at like the national migration of people from 2020. Like, it exacerbated people leaving the coast, fleeing the coast, going to Texas, going to Florida, going to the South, going to the Midwest, and leaving these areas that had high restrictions. They're like, we're done with it. We're out. We're leaving. And you can see that. So it's like, it's the exact same thing of just like it.
And that's going to be something that, to that point, is that we've already kind of seen where a large portion of the population falls under. And it's not, I don't think it's so much that, they're responsible. It's not that. I think it's more that it's like they're tired of all of this, right? And they've seen that, we're just purely talking stats, people, not talking political views or anything. Like, the number of mortality is really low. The number of severe cases is really low in relation to the overall population. You understand? Like, it's not that bad. There's a lot of people that we've gotten it. A lot of our family members have gotten it. It wasn't bad at all. You understand? We know people right now that have it. They're fine, right? So when you look at that and you look at the age, I think is going to be a huge factor. Younger people are a lot more against taking a vaccine or wearing a mask than you have your really older people. Yeah. So those demographics are going to be interesting to see, where are older people going, right? So is this going to affect places like, let's say, Florida, where all the old people go to Florida? But it's like, so what's that going to mean if Florida, they have DeSantis, that he is beyond vocal. I saw places they were calling him mini Trump. So he's beyond vocal about how he's like, nope, no mask. You're not being forced to get vaccines. You're not forced to do jack shit. You're
banning employers from requiring it. Yeah, I mean, them in Texas kind of go step and step for a lot of things.
Yeah, but he's a lot more vocal than Abbott.
Yeah, and but it's also, we live here, so we hear about these things here. Like, I doubt Florida hears about Bexar County fighting the mask mandate stuff. So I'm wondering if they have the infighting against municipalities in
everybody pays attention to San Antonio. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
They were saying that we beat Dallas as we're more heavily populated than Dallas is. not Dallas-Fort Worth, Dallas.
Well, yeah.
So, San Antonio is growing pretty big.
Yeah, I mean, it's the second largest city in Texas.
And if you say Dallas-Fort Worth, then you got to say San Antonio, Austin, because it's about the same distance. You know what I mean? So it's like, now, what's going on here? It's a powerhouse. Don't knock on San Antonio.
Yeah, it's gonna be North Texas versus South Texas.
But let me continue, because this builds on. I mean, this is something that we're gonna be covering a lot of things related to business and real estate because of this factor. So pay attention. The title of this article is "Everybody I Know is Pissed Off." So while most states and national GOP leaders are focused on defending the rights of unvaccinated Americans, new polling shows that the large majority of vaccinated adults, including a substantial portion of Republicans, support tougher measures against those who have refused COVID-19 shots. All of this suggests that as the Delta variant pandemic of the unvaccinated disrupts the return to normal life promised by the vaccines, a backlash may be intensifying among those who have received the shots against those who have not. And that could leave Republican leaders who have unstintingly, whatever, it's a weird word, stress the rights of the unvaccinated, including Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida and Greg Abbott of Texas, and House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Then it was said, over time, this general sense may grow of why are we who are vaccinated enduring this in order to coddle this liberty fantasy of the unvaccinated? And I think that is going to get stronger as the inconvenience grows and as the wind goes out of the getting back to normal sales, which is clearly happening. Everybody I know is pissed off. So that was another commentator saying that. So going back to this, people have gotten vaccinated. People do want to go back to normal. Even the unvaccinated. Everybody wants to go back to normal. But what's the issue is that right now, as it stands, the vaccine is the way we're going to do that, right? For all intents and purposes, that's what you hear, that's what you see, that's what's being put out everywhere. You get the vaccine, life goes back to normal, everything is great, right? So now they're saying, wait, so now our kids got to go back to wearing masks? We got to go back to wearing masks here? They're at some point, they're probably going to start limiting how many people go into places again and doing all this. It's like, wait, because some people don't want to get vaccinated? This is going to cost, again, like I said at the beginning, civil unrest. It's going to cost a lot of people to get pissed off.
Everyone's like, it's not political. I'm like, bullshit, it's not political. Like, everything is like, this is being used by both sides across all spectrums. I mean, even our two governors of DeSantis and Abbott are going back and forth to who can be the most strictest because they both want to become presidents in the face of the Republican parties. It's become just a political football that they're tossing back around, back and forth, and I just don't understand it. Just like from own personal experience, like had COVID, had common colds that were way worse than that. I know that's not the case for some people because obviously some people do get very sick from it, and I do sympathize for those people. But it's just one of those like, we have to shut everything down, and we have to penalize because we're the government and you have to do as we say, to where it's about overreach of just like, how much can we force upon our positions? Like, we believe this, how much power can we have? It's the power between municipalities versus the state. It's like, we want to do this because you say we can't do this. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people like, you say you can't, you tell me, like, I'm one of those people, you tell me I can't do something, I'm like, you watch me. Yeah. I'm going to do it. And
yes, you are.
So
Annoying.
you have the national government versus the state governments, the local municipalities versus state governments. You have everybody going back and forth and seeing like, how much power can you push and how much power do you have?
Well, so to that point, right? I forgot, I can't remember who was it that said it to me recently, but they're like, you think we're going to see a civil war, right? I was like, we are in a civil war. We've been in a civil war. I was like, it's just not being fought with weapons and killing people. I was like, this civil war, if you look at the country, is becoming more and more divided. Like, it's beyond insane how, like, people are choosing sides. And this is a huge divide. Yeah. This is a very, very big topic to divide because this is a topic of do we get to go back to normal or do we have to stay at home? So again, not whether there's government overreach, all of that, that's whatever you want to feel about it. That's fine. That's your opinion. That's your feelings. It's good. What I'm saying is that you got to pay attention as an investor and as a business owner, the fact that you have such a large population of people that are getting vaccinated, are afraid, right? Whether it makes sense to you or not, they are afraid. And this is going to affect the way policies are made. This is going to affect the way businesses are ran. This is going to affect the way people invest, buy, and sell real estate. This is going to affect all of that.
Well, you just look at it in the sense of like, we have a housing shortage. We know one of the major causes of this housing shortage is the government regulations around the industry and the fact that we have to have all these permits, we have to have inspections, we have to do all this stuff. Well, now them coming through and say we have to put more mask mandates in place. Well, people don't want to go to work. Yep. People, they limit number of capacities of going into government buildings. Well, now I can't get through permits as fast. You can't get support through the online. You can't go down there to figure out their stupid systems. So now it's going to slow down the building process even more. Yeah. To where it's like, okay, so now that tells me it's going to limit the supply of property. Once again, we covered that article to where Schertz-Cibolo were only allowing 7 units per builder per month to be built because they didn't have the staff to do this. So we're like, it's going to slow it down even more to where like housing costs are going to continue to rise to find the new equilibrium to where I just like median sales price again for what month would that be? July? It was up another $10,000. Yeah. So we're like, we're now changing our investment strategy. It's like, I'm not in a rush to finish renovations. It's like, if you got other projects, that's fine. You can go do all those ones, make your money, keep my costs down because every month the price of the house goes up $10,000. Yep. It's like, it's a small, quick renovation. We could have finished it probably a month ago if we would have pushed, but there was no need. No. Like, towards like, I'm just not moving quick on these things.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's something that like we talk about. As an investor, you got to be smart about what you're doing. You got to understand the numbers. You got to understand, like the whole point of this whole topic is you got to understand demographics. How do people buy? How do people invest? The psychology of people. Great book that I recommend everybody read is called Influence by Robert Cialdini. And he just came out with the revised version that's like, I think twice the size or 3 times the size of his original book. But it talks about the human psychology. How is it that people think in forms of groups, in forms of, if you can prove that other people are doing it, then they're more likely to do it as well. When you understand the psychology as an investor, now you can start seeing, okay, where are we now as investments go, as the market goes, right? Well, right now we are more leaning towards like this percentage of the population is fully vaccinated, right? So they're leaning more towards that. So if they're fully vaccinated, chances are they're going to be pissed off at anybody that isn't. Yeah. And they're going to be more prone to areas that are more protected and stuff like that. So if you have a larger percentage of that, then maybe you should be looking at picking up real estate in those areas because you're going to have more of a demand. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Versus the other areas. So, I mean, these are things this is not financial advice. This is just kind of like, how do you analyze the trends? This is not about, at least this should not be about, oh, I think people that wear masks are stupid, so I'm not going to buy there.
I think that's stupid.
That's very stupid because you got to think about what makes sense as an investment. That you cannot be emotional. Every time you're emotional in business, you're going to lose your ass. You understand? And like, you can have your political views and everything you want, but you still need money to feed your family. So you got to be smart or just get out of the business at that point. But let me continue with this next article that ties in. Is the title was funny. It said, "Forget government mandates. Companies are calling the shots." So you have United Airlines, Disney, Microsoft, Walmart, Google, Tyson Foods have announced plans to require their workers to get vaccinated before returning to office and other locales. Many more have reinstated mask mandates for frontline workers and others. We know some of you will disagree with this decision to require the vaccine for all United employees, said the CEO. But they added, the facts are crystal clear. Everyone is safer when everyone is vaccinated. President Joe Biden on Wednesday met virtually with executives from United and other companies to enlist them in getting more Americans vaccinated, even as Republican politicians such as Florida Governor DeSantis, Rand Paul, and Kentucky Senator Ted Cruz, Rand Paul of Kentucky, I was like, Ted Cruz isn't from Kentucky, and Senator Ted Cruz of Texas rallied against mandatory masking and vaccines. And it says, they say, it's time for us to resist. They can't arrest all of us, Rand Paul said in a video Monday condemning COVID-19 regulations. They can't keep all of your kids home from school. They can't keep every government building closed, although I've got a long list of ones they might keep closed or ought to keep closed. It is DeSantis who has become the poster boy for resistance as he prepares his 2022 re-election bid and what is widely expected to be a 2024 presidential campaign. His office on Monday said that the State Board of Education could move to withhold the salaries of superintendents and school board members who disregard the governor's executive order prohibiting mask mandates in school districts. But in Florida, one of the state's largest employers has parted ways with the Republican governor. Disney is requiring all of its salaried and non-union employees in the United States to be fully vaccinated. Employees have 60 days from the end of July to comply. So,
well, then there's the other thing we talked about, big government versus states, locals versus state, like everything like that. Well, now you also have companies versus local governments, because they also, Florida and Texas, have banned workplaces from requiring those things. But yet now the companies themselves are coming out saying, well, we're going to do it anyways. So it's going to add up all kinds of legal fights infighting for these kind of things. So it's,
and then you look at, the things that jump out to me is when you have people like Rand Paul and DeSantis and other ones, like they're saying, we must resist. What are they going to do? Arrest us all? They can't arrest us all. So what does that mean to you? Right? To me, that's like what any layman person hearing this, that's civil unrest. That means you should cause problems, right? And then I've heard people from the left say, it's criminal, people that don't get vaccines. It's dangerous what they're doing. They're being criminals. They're being terrorists is one of the terms I heard for not getting vaccinated.
Conspiracy theorists.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying like criminals, terrorists, they can't arrest us all. We must resist. You got to let these words in the ears of people that are overwhelmed, that are stressed out, unemployed, underemployed, looking for work, stressed, worried about what's going on, can't send their kids to school, need daycare, whatever it is. This is another boiling pot. This is something else that starts building up. And these are things that as investors, we need to be very cautious about. That if you're an investor in this moment, that you're just like, oh, market's going up, let it ride. Let me just keep throwing money at everything. We know investors are very new at the market and they're just buying shit up left and right because money is easy. And it's like, you got to understand and you got to be cautious. I'm not saying don't invest at all. You should always invest.
Yeah.
You just got to be smart with how you invest.
It's the famous Warren Buffett's like, always protect your downside. Like, so what if it doesn't go as planned? Like, what's your fallout? What's your fallout? But have you seen some of the stuff that's going over in Europe with regards to these mandates and stuff like that? So the EU and several like Greece and France and Germany are passing like basically green cards, but green passes. Okay. They're called. So if you're vaccinated, you get this pass, and you need to have this pass in order to literally just do about anything, kind of like New York, but even more so. And like 250,000 people rushed the streets of like France in front of their government or whatever it was, and were protesting this thing about their rights, the unvaccinated, saying like, you can't do this to us. Like, you are dividing, like segregating, being like all this racism thing. Like, now you're turning it towards like vaccinated versus unvaccinated, where it's like, you can't go in coffee shops, you can't go in restaurants, you can't go in bars, you can't go to entertainment, you can't take airlines, you can't do literally anything without this green pass thing showing you've been vaccinated. And they pass this stuff, and there's a lot of people that are actually, when they say like, what's the next step, like people actually coming out and banding together and being like, You want to see protests? All right, well, now we're going to protest the other direction.
Yeah.
And they're saying peacefully protest, but they had 250,000 people like marching the streets. I was like, that's not a small amount of people.
Well, and that's something that, we've seen here is like, you can have a mostly peaceful protest until you have a few jackasses that decide to cause problems. And then the mob mentality kicks in. And those few jackasses now all of a sudden have few thousand jackasses following them and causing real mayhem, real issues. And we saw this. We saw this already.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, those are the things that matter the most when you're thinking about this and you're looking at this. It's like, I do foresee another shutdown possibly coming, right? Because it's like, how can't it? With the way they're building this up, the way they're doing all this, and the way that even right now, to Val's point, is they're pretty much all saying this FDA said, okay, you can do booster shots too now, because apparently the vaccine doesn't prevent you from spreading it, and it doesn't prevent you from getting it. It just makes it so when you do get it, it's less aggressive, right? It has less of a chance to kill you. But they're seeing that it's not enough. You need booster shots. So now you're
booster every year. Boosters.
Yeah. So some of them are talking about a third to fourth shot that you're going to need. And this is something that it was even said at the beginning. This might be something that might need to be done twice a year, quarterly. You know what I mean? That you're going to need to get these vaccines. So you're polarized. Like, these things are very, very polarizing. People have this has been, and we saw it with that article, a political weapon that both sides are using. And you got to listen to it, because you got to pay attention. How's each side using this weapon, right? What are what's the governor from here doing? What is the law like for here in Bexar County? Again, whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. This is not about the politics. This is about, like, here in San Antonio, right? You got to look at the laws. Does San Antonio even have a case? If they have a case, okay, what is that going to mean for me as an investor? If they don't have a case, that means it's going to go back to pretty much being open and all that thing. What does that mean? Are people that are in San Antonio and get pissed that happened going to move? Are they going to go somewhere else? Are they going to relocate because of that? You understand? Because now, they may have gotten the COVID vaccine. That doesn't mean they're not going to get it. That doesn't mean that they're not going to get sick. That doesn't mean that they can't spread it. So now they're probably worried that it's like, damn, now all these other people are walking around with no vaccine and I can get sick still. You know what I mean? I can still get very sick and all this. And it's like, you can still get sick regardless, but, it's that fear that's going around that makes people, it's just what you and I have talked about before so many times. Somebody wears a mask. Somebody that doesn't looks at them, oh, look at this jackass. What an idiot. What a moron. Like, that level of rage that's in people goes to show the level of emotion that's behind the decisions they're going to make. And as real estate investors, buying a home, renting a home is an emotional decision, right? A lot of times it's how they come in and how they feel about the home.
Well, it's like, you look at it, like, when do investors thrive? When emotions are running high.
Yes.
It's like when 2008 or 2020, when everything's like, when emotions are in high, people panicked and sold and freaked out and went nuts. People that made money, the investors, like, they had their wits about them and they saw the opportunities. And they were the ones that profited from it. So it's one of the, when emotions run high, there's opportunity to be made somewhere. Right now, the emotions are running high, slowing down the building process, where I don't see 4 million homes coming online just like that, even with the recent drop in lumber prices. It's like, they're not going to get built because now you don't have the staffing for the regulations that they put in place for the municipalities to see these homes being built.
So let's cover some of the staffing issues, right? A study from Qualtrics asked people what they do if their employer mandated getting vaccinated. The result clearly show that the chasm between Americans, about 44% of workers said that they would consider leaving their jobs. 44% would consider leaving their jobs if they were forced to get their shots. Around 38% of workers would consider leaving their current employer if the organization did not enact a vaccine mandate. So you have 44% of people are saying they would leave, and 38% of people saying they would leave if they don't.
Wow.
So these are big percentages, right? So willingness to consider quitting without a mandate among men, 43% of them were men, and women were 32%. And then 51% were Democrats and 27% were Republicans.
So men were more, they wanted the mandates, right? Willingness to consider quitting without a mandate.
Correct.
Men were more than women and Democrats more than Republicans.
But what goes to show is that even 51% Democrats, 27% Republicans, there's still a large percentage there that's undecided, right? And a 27% of Republicans, 51, like that's, you put those things together, it's very large numbers you're looking at. It's even across political lines that this is happening. So then over half, 56% of respondents in the tech sector said they might walk if there was no mandate in place at work, while 34% of retail employees and 21% of those with government jobs said the same thing. Tech workers, who tend to be more liberal-leaning, showed strong support for vaccine mandates overall, with about 3/4 of workers expressing approval of the idea. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has weighed in with guidance that answers some workplace vaccination questions. Employers may encourage or require COVID-19 vaccinations, but policies must comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it talks about which act it is, and other workplace laws, according to them. It makes sense for companies to come down on a strict policy as they face considerable risk and liabilities. If a person contracts or spread COVID-19, a lawsuit against the firm may follow. So that's a huge fear for companies. Some workers don't have much of a choice as their employers have already made the decision. And this had a bigger list. So you have Facebook, Google, Twitter, Morgan Stanley, CNN, the Washington Post, United Airlines, Microsoft, Uber, Netflix, Walgreens, Tyson, Walmart, and Disney tell all or a segment of their workforce to get their shots. The way a person replies in a study may not necessarily correlate with what they do in real life. It is easy for a person to anonymously respond that they'll quit if forced to get vaccinated. The reality is it's not easy. So this is something that, you're looking at it and it's like, you look at these percentages and you say, okay, yeah, wow, those are crazy percentages. But look at all the people that are against it and all that. Okay, but when jobs become maybe harder to get, and it becomes more difficult and you're seeing more companies offer it, do the same thing, and your company is saying, hey, either you get vaccinated or you lose your job, I would bet that a lot of those people that said that they would leave won't. Because I think at the end of the day, they're going to be like, well, where the hell am I going to leave if everybody else is doing it too?
Yeah.
What am I going to do?
Yeah, I agree. It's like, let's say like it's not so easy just to quit. Yeah, you can't. You just been saying like I'm quitting my job. Well, it's like yes, there are plenty of jobs to choose from right now out there, but it's also one of these like you have to uproot your entire lifestyle and move. And they're like, can you find one in the local place that pays the same, or do you have to uproot and move? And like, how passionately do you feel like, yeah, I'll quit, but in reality, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to do it because I don't want to go through all that news. And that's what they're gonna do. It's like I don't think they're just gonna so much pressure from all sides that eventually is going to come down that they'll get what they want. Yeah, it's all. I mean, you got companies, you got municipalities, you got governments, you got all these people fighting amongst each other to where it's like us in between the individual, and finally people are just gonna be like, fuck it, I'm done fighting with this. Like, fine, let's do it. Let's move on. I'm over it.
Well, and then, I mean, a point that I see now is that you look at this, are we going to start seeing maybe a fight with companies where you're going to, because I already started seeing Grant Cardone came out and he said any company within his holdings will not require or demand any vaccine shots or mask mandates.
Yeah.
Right. So are we going to start seeing companies put up no vaccine required signs?
It's kind of like in the Texas versus California kind of thing last year where it's like, hey, no lockdowns here. Yeah. Come on, we're ready.
So is that going to be the next way that these companies attract, compete for talent, right? Where it's going to be like, And this is one thing that's very telling is that right now, a lot of talent that we are using in the workforce, a lot of it is based on tech. And when you have, like they said, the majority of the tech sector, how it's mostly liberal, like that's going to be a huge deciding factor for a lot of businesses to determine whether do I want to use this as a tool or not, because there's also that saying that like if you don't stand with it, then you stand against it. Where if these companies are like, you know what, I'm not going to demand it or fight against it, like I'm just going to leave it alone, are those companies going to get hurt? Because then people are going to be like, well, I don't know where you stand. You know, you haven't like picked the side. So, I mean, what do you think as far as like companies go, as far as being a business owner and owning your company and everything, like, how do you feel like this is going to affect? Because another point that they said was they run the risk that if they don't and somebody gets sick, they can come back and sue them. You know,
well, it depends on this. I think that comes down to state law too, because I don't remember if it was federally or state or what it was, that they prohibited and protected businesses from liability of COVID and stuff like that. I know there was stuff in the governments last year. I don't remember like where it actually ended up, and I think it was one of the federal ones. They were bidding back and forth. Like the Democrats wanted this and Republicans wanted that, to where it's like we wanted liability protection for businesses, and the Democrats said they wanted something else. I don't remember where that all ended up. To where like what is the liability based on that?
And then my thing is like too, you know, attorneys don't exist because you know they don't do anything. they are the biggest problems of why lawsuits and shit gets filed. I mean, you can essentially sue anybody for anything. You know, it's like, do they have a case? Are they going to have an attorney that's going to find a loophole around it? Like, as a company, if you're not this massive conglomerate, you know, if you're not an Apple or Google or Walmart, is that a big fear? If you're smaller, that's like, yeah, okay, maybe in Texas they don't have a right to sue me, but it doesn't stop them from trying and from me to having to defend myself. So as a business owner, is it smart, and can you have employees when they sign out, when you employ them, sign a waiver saying like, I don't hold my employer liable?
Yeah, if it's like, hey, vaccines are not required in here, and you're taking liability yourself to work here.
Right. So now,
I mean, I could definitely see that. And back to your point earlier of like, what do companies do as far as like using it to coax people? You kind of have to look at, well, what's your talent pool want? Do they want vaccination? Like if you're in a tech company and what was it, like 56% of people and like some of the best tech workers like require, it's like, you better require it because that's what you're going to need to attract talent to your company. It's like businesses, just like we talk about investing, it's unemotional. So it's just like, hey, is it good for my business or bad for my business, requiring or not requiring it? If you're a tech company and you want to recruit that talent and you want to grow your business, grow the business, which you have to do, it's your job. Well, I guess you got to require vaccines.
Yeah, and I think for the whole, you know, job market, like it becomes very tough for people, especially people that are already having a tough time finding work, when maybe you are one of those tech people that are not liberal, right? And you probably feel like, no, I don't want to get a vaccine. You're young, right? Maybe you already got COVID, like myself. Like I'd rather not put that kind of stuff in my body, right? Like I just don't feel like I need to. I feel like my immune system is strong enough. I've looked at the data, looked at the research and everything. I feel like I have a good chance, but I'm taking responsibility for my life. Yeah. Now, do I run the risk of spreading it? Everybody does. Somebody that's vaccinated runs the risk.
Yeah, so that's what you're seeing now. Like people that even have the vaccines, they still get it. It's like the vaccine was designed more. They're saying like it lessens the symptoms.
Yeah,
you just don't get as sick, but you still catch it and can still spread it. So like that's what just perplexes me about the whole thing. It's like,
and then if we want to get a little bit more talking about inefficiencies, is that, you know, they and you kind of seen this across the board. The narrative has moved away from deaths and moved towards more, you know, hospitalizations. Yeah. Right. That's why we're doing it. We're not doing it for the deaths because they realize that's like not that many people are dying. Like, yes, there's still a large number of people dying, but when you compare that proportion to the overall population, it's a very, very tiny percentage. Yeah. You understand? So when you look at that, now they're saying, you know, it's hospitalizations. Now the hospitals are being overwhelmed again. And my thing is like, how are hospitals being overwhelmed again when this has been going on for what, a year and a half? You know what I mean? Like, well, no, a year and a half, yeah, since March. So like a year and a half, and hospitals still don't have areas, don't have designation, don't have more beds, don't have areas, for COVID patients. They're not prepared, nothing. You know what I mean? Like, I just find that very irresponsible from the medical field. And excuse my ignorance, if there's a real reason why that's happening, I would love to hear it. I have not heard why. But to me, it's like, how is it 18 months later, you are still not prepared for this?
Yeah.
You understand? Like, since day one, they've always said, like, it pretty much needs to go through everybody. It's just, how bad is it going to be when it hits you? Yeah. Right? But it needs to go through. Like, it's a virus that's just, it's not going away.
Yeah.
You understand? So it's like, why aren't hospitals prepared? So then this doesn't become such a massive issue like it's becoming now. So again, this is serious. This is something that when we look at real estate, where are you going to be investing? Well, this is a very serious issue as far as like, you look at employment. You look at who are your biggest employers? So you look at a place like Austin, right? Austin is huge in the tech sector. They're huge in the liberal sector, right? So it's like, if you're an investor and you're investing in Austin, like, you kind of want them to push for mandating masks, mandating vaccines, forcing all of this, because it's going to make the people that have pretty much blown up Austin want to go to Austin more.
And stay there. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not want to move. And then if you're like in other cities where maybe it's heavier on the unvaccinated side and people want, they don't want to get vaccinated and all that, you got to see those things. You got to see, where am I going to invest? Where my business? If you're a business owner and you're hiring, you got to consider this, because then you got to consider the liability aspect of that. Right? Yeah. There's a huge liability. If somebody, God forbid, starts working for you and they get COVID and then they decide to sue you, that can put a lot of businesses out of business.
Yeah.
You understand? Whether they have a case or not, but you having to defend yourself, the amount of headache and money it's going to cost you. So, I mean, this is, I think, a very big issue. This is going to be something that, as investors, we need to take very, very serious. And as looking at, how are these trends developing? How are these laws? How, Bexar County fighting with Governor Abbott, how's that going to play out? And apparently Monday is when they have the court case. I don't know if there's going to be a decision Monday or if that's when it starts and the court case lasts for weeks. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what the heck is going to happen. But it's going to be a huge factor. I mean, a lot of businesses just recently started like lifting their mask mandates.
Yeah.
Now, and they were doing it because more of their customers were feeling comfortable. Now with this, we're starting to see more people mask up. So our business is going to start reincorporating their mask mandates. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think it's going to be something that, like, this is going to affect the market, employment, people quitting, not quitting, getting fired. This goes against a lot of people's very strong belief. And then it's combating with their ability to make money and survive. So it's like, do I get a vaccine that I don't believe in, right? Or maybe I feel like it could kill me or whatever your thought is. Or do I quit my job and go broke because I can't find another job because employment is difficult to find and get hired and all these other companies are doing the same thing? What do I do?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think overall, it's a very tough situation that we're in. And it's something that I think everybody needs to, especially as real estate investors, like, you need to be very aware of it. With that being said, I did want to make a quick little announcement. We are going to do a property tour today. So if you're in San Antonio, in the San Antonio area, make sure you text property tour to 210-794-9898. And we're going to be going to check out one of the houses, the one that John was saying that we are not in a rush to sell. Because it keeps going up. So that one's completed pretty much. And we're going to go over that one, go over everything that we've done to it, all the work, everything. So if you want to come hang out with us and check that out, make sure you text property tour to 210-794-9898. And with that being said, what you want to get into the infrastructure bill? Because I'm very curious about that.
You just haven't been following that like every single day, just seeing what was going on?
No. I wait for Coffee with the Johns to get my news. If I get it all week long, I'd be freaking fried already. This thing stressed me out.
Yeah. Let me see. Where did I put it?
I would say economy.
Oh, No, yeah. The Senate just passed a massive infrastructure bill. Here's what's in it. So it's kind of long. You doing all right over there? Are you doing with your fan? Did it wrong. So the infrastructure bill, it's kind of long because it breaks down like the 6 main points of it. Mm-hmm. So this is the bipartisan portion of it, the one where they all agreed on to actually put it, but it's also the one that they say is the House will not take up until the bigger one of $3.5 trillion is there that expands all kinds of social programs. So the Senate approved a sweeping $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill on Tuesday that includes a substantial increase in funding for roads, broadband, energy usage, marking a major step forward in President Joe Biden's economic agenda as the nation continues to recover from the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. I don't know if I'd say the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. I think the Great Recession in 2008 was pretty bad too. But anyways, like this is the portion that it seems like it's actually infrastructure that I think of it, like broadband, bridges, roads, like actual things that transmit data and goods and services and stuff. The vote was 69-30, with 19 GOP senators joining Democrats following months of negotiation. With its massive price tag adding $550 billion in new spending, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act would upgrade the nation's power grid, future efforts to fight climate change, and start the removal of lead pipes that contaminate water supplies. Here's a look at the 6 major elements of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Physical infrastructure repairs. The biggest sum of money is directed towards repairing the nation's roads and bridges, which faces a $786 billion backlog of investment needs, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers. Under the plan, $110 billion in new federal funding is set aside for physical infrastructure with a focus on climate change mitigation and safety measures, including cyclist and pedestrian protections. Clean energy makeover. The bill provides $73 billion in expanding clean energy sources and modernizes the nation's aging electricity grid with new transmission lines, the single largest investment in clean energy transmission in American history. Closing the digital divide. And this is the one part of it I'm like, that actually makes sense. For years, this is the part, it's like people having internet shows that more people can contribute to society across lines and actually speeds things up. So for years, policy experts have insisted on fixing the gaps in broadband internet access. The pandemic has only amplified these equity concerns as much of the nation continues to work from home, receive healthcare remotely, and learn online. In attempts to close the digital divide, the package includes $65 billion to connect rural areas and low-income communities to high-speed internet. Lead pipe replacement. The legislation allots $15 billion for lead pipe replacement, though water sector leaders argue it costs additional $45 billion to replace all lead pipes and service lines across the country. Democrats and Republicans have touted efforts to clean up water sources for years, sparked by the lead crisis in Flint, Michigan that started in 2014 and drew international attention on long-term effects to lead exposure. Public transit. Under transportation spending, the bill amortizes the largest investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak 50 years ago. Some $66 billion will eliminate the Amtrak maintenance backlog, modernizing the Northeast Corridor and expanding rail services in high-potential areas outside the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. This is the part to me that I'm just like, why do we keep putting good money after bad? Amtrak, which is state-owned, for-profit enterprise, reported a net loss of $875 million in 2019 alone. That's before the pandemic and everything. They lost damn near $1 billion a year and has lost money every year in its history. But federal subsidies and payments from states have allowed the agency to remain in service. And now we're going to take $66 billion to fix it, to keep it losing money every single year. Like that to me is just one of those. I'm just like, what? Why?
Yeah.
Why? But
yeah, or why not just absorb it, and where it's not a for-profit, it's just kind of like a service, I guess, that the government provides or something that becomes, I don't know, write-off. I mean, this is like freaking Tesla, it's just being funded when it's hemorrhaging money every single year. Was hemorrhaging money.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's there's a lot of things here, and capital asset pricing says the pork in the infrastructure bill will be in the detail.
Oh, that's what I was getting. My next point was going to be. It's like, all right, So 6 major portions of this bill. I don't have a calculator on me, but 110 billion for infrastructure needs, 73 billion for clean energy, 65 billion for the digital divide, 15 billion for lead pipe replacement, and 66 billion for public transit. That does not add up anywhere close to $1.2 trillion. That wasn't even
210, 220
yeah, it's like, a little more than that. But yeah, it's like it was like maybe a quarter of the 1.2 trillion. So it's like, oh, these are the 6 major components. Like, well, where is the rest of the money going?
Yeah.
Like, where are you allocating those? Like, here's the main thing. Like, 15 billion was one of your major things. Like, 15 billion out of 1.2 trillion is a very, very, very small subset. It's like, what, just over 1% of the bill cost? And that was a major component of it.
Yeah.
I don't understand, like, where's all this money going? And that's just the our good old American government just taking money and just disappears.
Yeah.
Don't pay attention
to
it.
Well, I mean, a few things that they definitely do need to be fixed, updated, upgraded, changed, whatever needs to happen, but it is our electrical system. I mean, right now you have parts of the U.S. that have been without power because of the immense heat wave that they've been getting. You know, places like Seattle, Washington, New York is getting hit. Like, they're getting 105-degree weather that they're not used to getting. Yeah. The same like when Texas got the very cold temperatures that we're not used to getting. That the electrical grids cannot sustain when the weather hits you. You know, they're not able to sustain that level of heat. And we saw even with like the water and with everything, we saw, well, CPS here in San Antonio had sent everybody like, yeah, we're going to jack up your electricity if you don't use less of it. You know, so in order to incentivize you to use less electricity, they increase the bill. So that way you can use less. But it's like, I'm not going to keep my temperature at 78. You're out of your damn mind.
You can barely survive at 70.
Yeah, exactly. At 70, I need a fan on me. Like, no, it's just not going to happen. So we go back to those things of going back to where are people going to be moving to? Well, people are seriously reconsidering because of weather issues. You know what I mean? Now it's like, well, if we get another heat wave, it shuts down the whole freaking state. So what are we going to do there? Or if we get another cold winter, which a lot of people are expecting Texas to get another really cold winter like we did last year. It's like, what's going to happen? Are we going to shut down again? You know, is it going to cause more problems? Did they even fix the problems from last time? So I think it's like, if you're going to put money in, those are real areas that you should put money in. You know what I mean? Because those are areas where those economies completely are forced to shut down for the time being. Like, that's a serious problem.
Yeah, it's not the government coming and shutting it down. It's like, no, like, the damn infrastructure can't sustain normal use of people, and that commerce is shut down, especially for a state as large as Texas. Like, it didn't just shut down just South Texas. No, it shut down Texas.
Well, and we saw like our internet speeds went way the hell down. Like, for the ones that we had
power. To where like you were talking about, like, whoa, it's a lot of time I can catch up on doing some work and stuff like that. I was like, you kind of need internet to do just about everything.
Yep.
To where like, well, I have an internet connection, but it's slow as hell because they weren't getting power. So yeah. It's very.
Yeah, Brian Pauling, that he had a good point here. He says maybe they can roll Amtrak into the post office and it can transport mail. Buy a stamp, take a ride.
Yeah, two things that are just notoriously atrocious for any form of efficiency: the post office and Amtrak.
Yeah.
What do those two things have in common? Run by the government. So let's give them control of everything.
Wow, somebody's got political.
Yeah, nope. So, that's sorry.
What's your next one?
Angry. That was really about like what's in the portion that passed.
Mm-hmm.
Where that's going to go with the $3.5 trillion one, who knows? Because they're doing it via budget resolution, which is a loophole in government that requires only 50% of voters or 50% of. You just have to get a majority. And right now it's 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans, and the vice president breaks a tie, which is Democratic. So they can go via budget resolution and can restructure this whole thing. And they're saying, but this next one, it's about a ton of social programs, and they're labeling it as infrastructure for expanding or lowering the Medicaid age requirement from 65 down to 60. Then that's healthcare for older people. They can't afford it. Then it's making the child tax credit more permanent, raising tax on corporations, doing all of this stuff, and they want to hide in like $3.5 trillion in spending for this thing. But while they passed the first procedural vote to move towards budget resolution, there are several Democrats that they said they're going to have to tread very, very lightly to not lose, because they have a very slim majority, or they have a majority by one person in the Senate and only a few in the House.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of progressives that are sticking their heads in the sand, or not, their feet in the sand, and saying, nope, we will not negotiate. We want everything. And if we take anything out of that, we will vote against it. And then you have some more of the moderate Democrats, like I think it's a lady from Arizona, I believe, and then Joe Manchin of West Virginia. And both of them have come out and said, like, I voted to go ahead. They're coming out in statements saying, like, I voted to go ahead and move towards this because I do agree some of it has some warrant to it and it is needed. But I am seriously concerned about the overall size and scope of this investment, especially when we're looking at these inflation numbers that are coming out and our national debt just massively exploding over the last 2-3 years. And like, so some serious concerns about that being fiscally responsible, the size of this, and then doing that to where now you have those people saying, like, yeah, we'll do it, but we want something half the size. Then you got the progressives on the Democratic side that are like, no, we want more. We want it $5 trillion. Like, so it's going to be a very.
So right now, this 1.5 trillion one is in Congress, right? And Pelosi said that she's not going to pass it if the 3.5 is coming behind it.
Because the House is in recess for summer break until September 20th.
Yeah, they never work. I get it.
Yeah. So the Senate passed it, sent that bill over to them, but they're not here to do anything. But she said she won't even bring up the first one for vote unless the second one is alongside it.
So what happens then to all of the problems we discussed if neither one of these get pushed through? Like, everything stays as is? What problems could we see come out of this? Could we see, again, and not to get political, people, please don't get so offended. Let's try to look at this with a little bit more of an open mind so we understand as investors. But being that this is COVID and everything has been used on both sides as a political tool, if this doesn't get passed, will we see COVID all of a sudden get ridiculously more dangerous and forceful shutdowns happen where these packages need to go through to get stimulus packages out, right? Are they gonna, you get where I'm going at? Like, no. Are they gonna pass it this way, or are things gonna get so bad later that they're gonna then pass it that way? Because COVID getting bad and everything, like, nothing's really changed. You know what I'm saying? Like, the amount, infections has spiked. Well, yeah, everybody started going out. It's the summer. Everybody's been traveling, going everywhere. The virus didn't go away. It still needs to spread through everybody. Everybody was going to get, everybody started getting tested more because a lot of people started going back to work. So that's why the numbers spike, where before people were home. They weren't getting tested. You know, everybody starts going back to work. You get tested, the numbers go up. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you look at all these things and it's like, yeah, of course it was going to go up. It was bound to go up. You understand? So it's like, does it become more severe where now the government just says, no, we don't want it this high. We're going to shut it down. We're going to shut everything down. And then it's like, oh, we're shut down. We need another stimulus.
Well, but I mean, who knows where it goes. But I mean, as far as like the shutdown aspect go, I mean, like Texas didn't even really shut. They did originally one time for April when everybody shut down to kind of protect the way. But like ever since then, been very, very, very open. Since and so I don't see Texas like coming out and saying we need all businesses to shut down.
Right.
So I mean, there's the good side about it, and I mean, minus if you turn the freaking news off and just ignore people that are wearing masks, I couldn't. Oh no, I'm saying in the sense like you just didn't like ask the question. You're like, business is normal. I mean, places are packed. Restaurants are packed. Everywhere I go is packed. Like, the roads are packed. Traffic's back. Schools. I mean, everybody's out and about. Like, so if you just didn't question why people were wearing masks and weren't paying attention to the news, you wouldn't notice anything different between 2019 and now.
Yep.
Well, so it's that's
but
where
the thing is, like, people do pay attention to the news.
No, I do know that.
No, but going back to what we talked about before of, like, as an investor, what do you look at is you look at those things. You know, like you said, Texas didn't, like, completely shut down like so many other places in the country. So what I said before, I think on the last Coffee with the Johns, is that I think we will see another wave of the people that were on the fence about moving, definitely moving. Like, I mean, I have family in New York, and they're telling me how pretty much in New York City, if you want to go to restaurants, you want to get on the train, you got to
get
anywhere.
Your brother to buy a car.
Yeah, you gotta prove that you're vaccinated. You got to show that you're vaccinated. If not, you pretty much can't do anything. You're not allowed anywhere, right? I'm sure in the more rural areas of New York, like that's probably not an issue. But when you talk about New York City with 9+ million people.
Well, and that's also like it's the economic driver of that entire state. You move New York out, and New York is nothing.
Well, and you know Cuomo, who recently decided to resign.
Oops.
But we talked about it before too, how he was begging people to come back. Of how many left? Like, is this gonna make New York more desirable or less desirable? Because I know a lot of investors were talking about. This is the time when you buy New York, right? Because New York is on sale right now. And of course, people are going to come back because it's New York. Who the hell doesn't want to be in New York? Businesses, everything, right? Like, it's New York. It's going to come back. But now with this, it's like, are we seeing kind of like, you know, it crashed and went up a little bit? And are we going to see another big dip? You know, because it's like they're pretty much, if you're not vaccinated, like you're not allowed to go anywhere. I mean,
I don't know. But you look at the numbers, like 70% of the U.S. population has at least had one shot.
They're saying a little over 50% of the U.S. population is fully vaccinated.
Fully vaccinated, and like close to 70% have.
I mean, it's a big number.
It is.
It's a big number.
And it's like 70%. So it's like, okay, if 70% have had one shot, that means 70% are going to get the second shot.
Exactly.
Eventually.
And then
so you look at those numbers, like, well, obviously those 70% are okay with it.
Yeah.
And like the more pressure they put, and that's what I said, I think it comes back down to how much can control and power can authority, whether it be a state, company, municipality, federal government, local governments, press upon their people. They're all testing, using this, like the old saying, like never let a good crisis go to waste. They're like, we're in a crisis, and they're trying to see how much power they can get and get these laws written into the rule book. Yeah. So the next time this happens, those laws are clearly defined and who has power.
Yeah, and they're still bypassing them anyway. But like, let's say even to that point, to what point are these, you know, like let's say the Abbotts and the DeSantis gonna keep fighting when you see that 70% of the U.S. population is vaccinated and growing, right? It gets to a point where it's like, look, guys, like it seems like the people that you're fighting for, a very, very small demographic of people. That's like the reason you're fighting. You know, I call me a cynic or whatever you want to call me, but like I don't believe politicians give a goddamn about anybody. They care about themselves and getting reelected. So it's picking a side so I can get the most votes. But if you're seeing 70% of the people are vaccinated, then it's like, it doesn't seem like you're going to win many elections, bud. You know what I mean? Like you're kind of fighting a losing battle here. At what point are they going to say, all right, let's just kind of give in because it's just what it is. The same as businesses. When are businesses going to start giving in and be like, yeah, we got to start demanding it because if not, we're going to get great people are going to leave and even better people are not going to want to come work for us. And then it's like, then we start hurting as a business. Yeah. So it's like,
who knows?
Those are things like when you see these major corporations, Walmart's, Facebook, Google, everybody demanding them, it's like, the hell else do you have? Yeah. It gets to a point where it's like, go live off the land somewhere? Because if you want to be in any
that's what I was talking with somebody the other day about. It's like, what do you do? And they're like, oh, we fight and stuff. It's like, but if the majority of people don't want to, it's like, what are your options? You're going to go raise a cow and a couple chickens and live off the farm? It's like, you can't own anything. I was like, you're going to have to go to like some mountainous city and live off in the woods that nobody knows you're there. Yeah. Like you just have to, like, you have a cell phone, you wouldn't have electricity, you wouldn't have this because like you're off the grid, because if you're on the grid, they know where you're at and they could find a way to pressure you to get these quote unquote vaccines and to get you what you want. It's like, can they turn the pressure up?
With what I said before about them saying how it's criminal for people not to have it, that they're borderline terrorists because of what they're doing. That's kind of setting the stage. At some point, are you going to be getting arrested for not having it? I mean, somebody had told me, I don't know if it's true or not, that they're saying like in Australia, it's pretty much gone that way. So, you know, like, is that going to happen? Where we're going is not conspiracy theories or anything like that. It doesn't matter. You know, like how pissed off you get about this. What we're saying is, how does that affect your investments. What trends are you seeing? Based on everything that we said here, based on everything that we're talking about, where are you going to see the most opportunity as far as real estate goes? That's the question. Based on that, that's where you make your decisions. You understand, as to where you're going to invest. And that's the place that you and I are always analyzing, and we're always talking about and trying to determine. It's like, is it going to be Texas, or should we start looking to invest somewhere else? Right? It's like, I don't know. You know, if all of a sudden you start seeing us recording from a different studio, then you know what we decided. But until then, we still believe in Texas. We still believe in what's going on here. So regardless of which way it goes, like, we still believe that the market itself is strong. Demand, infrastructure, a lot of things in here are very strong. That's why we're in Texas. Mm-hmm. But what do you have next? Do you have anything?
You wanted to hold off on this map showing real rental assistance state?
Well, I wanted to get into first inflation nation. So we have the Labor Department reported Wednesday that consumer prices were 5.4% higher in July than a year ago. That matches the June inflation rate, which was the highest in nearly 13 years. The increase was driven by rising costs for shelter, food, energy, and new cars. Most of the recent jump in inflation has been caused by the pandemic's bottleneck, like the shortage of chips that limited new car production and caused a big spike in the price of used cars.
You said chips, and I was like, I feel like I can get chips at the grocery store pretty easily. Went the whole other way. I like chips. And
so continuing with this, wow, whoops. Somebody's hungry. Rising worker pay could become a bigger factor in higher prices going forward, even if it's not raising alarm bells yet. So you have burrito chain Chipotle, for example, boosted its average pay to $15 an hour this summer, but to cover the cost of that pay increase, Chipotle raised prices 3.5 to 4%. For the moment, restaurants are able to pass on higher costs to consumers without a hit to their bottom lines because demand for eating out remains so strong. People are tired of cooking their own meals. They're tired of cleaning up after themselves. They want to be waited on, and they want to be social. And restaurants are a great place to do that. The rising cost of living erodes some of the benefits of higher pay for workers who will have to pay more for a range of goods across the board. So you're looking at all this, and they're increasing wages, but then they're increasing food costs and everything, like we discussed before that they were going to do, because it's like you can't pay people more and live off the same margins. Like, you got to increase cost of things. But one thing that they're not talking about is what a lot of people call shrinkflation, right? And for those of you that don't know what shrinkflation is when they sell you the same bag of chips with more air in them. So that time I did say chips, okay? The eating chips. Gotcha. But when you sell the same bag, and Chipotle may be doing the same shit, where they increase their prices a little bit, and you're saying how they're sustaining their wages. Well, maybe their burritos got a little bit smaller. You know what I mean? Maybe they're putting a little bit less meat, a little bit more lettuce. You don't know. You know, they do these little tricks that it's not enough for most people to realize.
That might be actually good for some people, eating less food.
Yeah. So, but you look at this, and those are things that you got to keep in mind, that you say, oh, but look, inflation isn't going up because these prices aren't going up. Okay, the prices aren't going up, but are you getting less? You know, that's something that I've always heard people complain, but they don't put two and two together. That's like, oh, look, I bought the cereal box that's bigger. What I do all the time, and this is a habit I've always had, is I always look at the actual weight. I look at the weight or the fluid ounces or something like that. I look at the actual, because then because they always, like, you have this size for this price, or this size that's much bigger for this price. And it's like, but in proportion, it's only a little bit bigger. I do that
all the time.
I'm not paying an extra $2 for that.
H-E-B does this a lot. It puts like the price per ounce or price per quantity on the stickers. So if you look at like this, like I recently did it towards like, hey, buy the big bottle of 2 for $5 of the seasoning packet, or on sale you can get 5 for $5 of the smaller ones.
Yeah.
and then they break down the cost per ounce in those, and it was still cheaper to buy the 5 small ones than the 2 big ones.
Right.
So it does. The only thing I have never been able to figure out, and it baffles me, is toilet paper. Because it's like, how many rolls is like, this is a mega roll. Like, I've never seen a normal size roll, and it's like cost per sheet, cost per weight, like they give all these different measures.
Even toilet paper. I mean, they could start with toilet paper just taking out, putting a few less sheets at a time. You know what I mean? Per rolls. And all of a sudden, those little bit less sheets over the quantity of everything adds up to a lot of money for them. Yeah. So when you look at inflation, you look at costs, you look at all these things, it's like there's a lot of way inflation is going to hit you. But one of the things that's very interesting is that you had brought up before how rents are a big part of the CPI, right? They're like, I think, a third or something like that.
Yeah.
But they are not factoring the true rent increases that we've had.
Yeah.
They're not factoring that in. So if they were to factor that in, actual inflation is even much higher than that.
Yep.
But wages are not keeping up with that. Right? So where am I going with all this? Is that you're going to start seeing this in a lot of restaurants. You're going to start seeing this in a lot of the food. You're going to get that inflation. It's just going to come in different ways. Maybe you're going to get a little bit of price increase and a little bit less food, and that's going to balance out a little bit. So you see a little bump in price, which is, oh, it's okay. And you get a little bit less food, which the majority of people don't realize. So then it's like, yeah, it's fine. You know what I mean? Look, it only went up 25 cents. Like, yeah, but you also got 10% less food.
Well, you'll notice that too. If they do get this like bigger infrastructure package through, they were showing to pay for it by raising the corporate tax. And it's like corporations don't pay taxes. Like, yes, their tax rate might go up, but that gets passed straight on down to the end consumer. Like, their margins are set. They make those big corporations, like, they make 10 to 15% margin. That's the average. To where if you raise their taxes, they're still going to make the 10 to 15%. And it's just going to come down from smaller quantities, higher prices, less workers. Yeah. It's like they don't pay it. Like, yes, more money goes to government, but it gets passed on straight through to the bottom line in consumers and their workforce. So you'll definitely see more of that for sure. Yeah. So I do have another.
I wanted to say, is it on inflation?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
This is when the report came out. It says Dow futures jump 120 points after inflation report is not as bad as feared. Not as bad, but still bad. So stock market goes up. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 rose on Wednesday after inflation jumped, but not quite as much as investors feared when stripping out volatile food and energy prices.
When stripping out. Okay.
Yeah. July Consumer Price Index released Wednesday showed prices jumped 5.4% since last year compared to expectations of 5.3%, according to economist survey by Dow Jones. The government said CPI increased 0.5% in July on a month-to-month basis. But investors were concentrating on the core rate of inflation, which could signal inflation will remain tempered and the economy will remain strong. CPI excluding energy and food prices rose 0.3% last month, below the, get this, 0.4% increase expected. So 0.1 different. Core prices still jumped 4.3% on a year-over-year basis. The data should help assuage investors' fears that the Fed is too laid back about inflation pressures, said Seaman Shah, the chief strategist at Principal Global Investors. The detail of the data release suggests some easing in the reopening and supply shortage-driven boost to prices, and tentatively suggests that the inflation may have peaked. Investors in the transitionary camp will feel slightly vindicated.
I'll teach you English later.
Yeah, I'll take lessons from you. So, very interesting to see that, like, oh, it wasn't as bad, so it's like 0.1 less, and that's saying, like, well, inflation seems to have peaked because it wasn't raising anymore. It's still at a high level, but it's slowly coming back down. So, I mean, we see it in lumber prices to where, like, a sheet of plywood to where, like, right now I'm like, man, I'm kind of glad we hit a delay in our project because our lumber package dropped in half.
Yep.
Because I just spent $6,000 in plywood yesterday, and 6 months ago, or not 6 months, like just as recently as like 2-3 months ago, that sucker would have been like $10,000-$12,000 in plywood because a sheet of half-inch plywood went from $49 down to $23 in a month at Home Depot.
Well, but there's also like kind of like what is it, a hurricane, right? That they always talk about, the tail of the storm. This is something that everybody thinks, lumber prices are coming back down. Great. Everything is getting back to normal. But all of a sudden we start seeing shortages in other areas. We're seeing shortages in electrical supplies. We're seeing shortages in plumbing materials. My wife was telling me about insulation. I have my wife, she has a friend that she says her daughter got hurt. They took her to the ER. She needed stitches, but they don't have any more numbing cream. So her little 2-year-old needed to get stitches with no numbing cream. I was like, that must have been a hell of an experience. But it's like, it's things that you don't think about normally, right? It's not just the, lumber went up, now it came down, it's over. It's like, no, there's still more that's been affected that hasn't caught up yet. You know what I mean? That we do see shortages in so many things. There are things that, that you would buy regularly at Amazon or through Amazon, and all of a sudden it's like, you go, it's like only 2 left, and then they're out of stock for weeks. Or you order something, and it's like, no, we're out of stock. We don't have any. We'll get some later. And it's like, there's these shortages and everything. It affects the whole supply chain.
Yep.
But with that being said, I want, with this whole inflation conversation, I wanted to tie it into real estate, is about how much rental assistance has been given out by states, and you're gonna see how, my point on how this ties into inflation. So for the last 6 months or so, more than 11 million renters have reported being behind. That's a huge number. 11 million renters have reported being behind. So out of the $46 billion, just around $4.2 billion of that money has been reached to households, according to a new analysis. So what's that? Less than 1%, 10%. Wow. Yeah, so less than 10% of the money has been distributed. Texas has already managed to distribute more than half of its first round of federal rental assistance, while South Carolina has given out less than 2%. Oh, I thought that was my phone. Less than 2%. Across the country, programs are understaffed and overwhelmed by the volume of applications, insufficient outreach, and arduous documentation requirements have also been barriers. A recent study by the Urban Institute found that fewer than half of the renters even know about the federal assistance. So start piecing these things together. If you're an investor, start piecing all these data points together. You have 11 million renters that are reported being behind. You have $46 billion of rental assistance out there, but only $4.2 billion has been given. And then you have about half of the renters, so half of the 11 million, don't even know about the federal assistance or are even trying to get it. So Andrew Aaron, Vice President for Research at the Housing Coalition, said he ran into one application that was 45 pages long. An application, 45 pages long. Another required renters to document their income over the last 6 months. They're demanding things that many tenants don't have, like the landlord's email address, for example, said Dan Rose. He's an assistant professor of sociology and the organizer of Housing Justice Now. Public officials are more concerned about so-called scammers getting this money than they are about people who truly need it. The CDC issued the new eviction moratorium last week after the previous one had expired July 31st. Protection applies until October 3rd, and to places where COVID rates remain high, which is about 80% of the U.S. counties. So, what will happen to inflation index when a large portion of the 11 million properties that the landlord gets back after evictions are up? Because you have 11 million people that are behind. They're saying half of them don't even know what to apply for them. The other half is not even getting it. They only have until October. So once evictions start creeping in, those people get evicted. Those landlords are desperate to jack up the rents to meet the market standards, because they're still probably charging rent from freaking 2 years ago. You know what I mean? And rents, as we've seen, have gone drastically up. So how's that going to affect inflation index and everything when all those homes...
the massive amount of supply hits the market and prices fall? Because that's one that's not like foreclosures where houses have to hit the market. There's not that many foreclosures in relation to the overall housing as there are renters behind to renters. So I think that is something that, like, once those people do start, that inventory does get to the market, you're going to see some of those prices, like, I wouldn't say they're going to fall by any means, but you're going to see, I think, a decent amount of supply come in the coming months. But it's also one of the things, like, the court system has to work through all of those. Yep. It's not like we're going to do them all in one shot, and every state's different. Texas, I think, is one of the fastest ones to do process evictions. But it's still one of those that, like, they can only do so many a day. And there's a whole process that has to go through that. So I think some of that relief is going to come. But it also, in the point of the money getting out to it, is like, they threw it on these states to say, hey, here's all this money we're going to pass for you guys to get to tenants, renters, owners, whoever they may be. States have no capability to process that stuff. So they had to start from scratch with all this money, short-staffed, and build out whole processes, especially amongst one of the greatest shortages of labor in most recent history. That it's like, now you got to get tech people, you got to build platforms, you got to get analysts, you got to get phone, you got to build all of these processes out to, like, try to avoid scammers. Because I know there were several people that I had talked to. One in particular, he said, I had a tenant legitimately tell me that she was not going to pay rent. And it says, well, you still have to pay rent. No, I don't. The government says you can't evict me. And the government says that they're going to pay for it. So you can go collect from them.
Oh, man.
But the government is also, the states are being kind of smart about that. It's like, no, you can't just pay rent because you don't want to pay rent. Now we're giving it. Like, that's not how this works. You actually had to have needed the money. You have to document your income for 6 months. So it shows that you made plenty of money and you just didn't want to pay your rent. They're like, no, we're not going to give you money for that. So that kind of person's like, if you're trying to game and work the system, and I'm actually kind of happy to hear that. It's like, you tried to abuse the system just because you didn't want to, and you're going to pay the price at the end of it. But you had to build through, how do they eliminate those people? That's why it's been so slow to get this money out, because, like, they have no processes to give tenants money.
Yeah. No, I think that's an excellent point. And it's just, I don't agree with that prices are going to drop. I don't think, because demand is still way too high, especially in the areas that, are hot and are going to remain hot. So, but that being said, I mean, they're pretty much saying it here. You have half of them don't even know about it or not even trying to apply. You have the other half that they're being hit with 45-page applications and asking for things that they don't have access to. And we know how lazy people are. When you got to go through all those things, now you start factoring in your head. It's like, okay, so I'm getting evicted. What do I do next? You know what I mean? Like,
or it's like, I still don't have to pay rent till October.
Yeah.
As I start looking, I know I could do all that stuff, get it, but it's just like, I'll just save my money so I can go and
then you have that. You have, like you said, you have the city. You have places that are still severely understaffed. So if you get all of a sudden, like what we see all the time, we get always those calls like a day before foreclosure, like, hey, I need to sell my house. I'm getting foreclosed tomorrow. It's like, geez, you literally waited to the last second to do this. So you're going to get probably a huge inflood of applications like in the next month or so, right? That they're not going to be able to sort through. The extension is going to expire, and then you're going to have a massive wave of evictions. You know what I mean? Because it's still a lot of people. It's still going to be a lot of evictions happening. So, and like to your point, not everybody's going to qualify because there's a lot of people that purposely chose not to pay. So it's like, well, there you go. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to get it. It's not going to happen. Well, you go get it from the government. It's like, why am I going to go get aid for you because you don't want to pay your rent?
Yeah. Well, then a lot of times, like, they might just look at it, it's been this long. It's like, well, I just go over to my landlord and say, hey, I'll just give you you don't need to process the eviction. I'll just give you the keys, turn the house back over.
Yeah.
And so now the eviction doesn't even go on their record. So now they haven't been paying rent for an entire year. Landlord's tired of it. They're like, just give me the house back. Like, I don't even want to evict you. Just give me this back and you move on. I won't file it. And now you can go get a new start over again. So this tenant just basically lived rent-free for a year, doesn't have an eviction on their record, because they just did, like, it's the equivalent of cash for keys for, like, a mortgage. It's like, hey, here you go. You pay me $500. I'll move. You don't have to do the eviction. You can have the house back instead of going through the whole process.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you start, again, like what we started with at the beginning of this episode. You start putting the pieces together. This is a big puzzle, right? You start putting the pieces together to see what the whole picture looks like. So you're having, a lot of areas that are starting to force the vaccines. A lot of companies are starting to force the vaccines. You have municipalities, governments. Biden said federal workers and everybody that works for the government, they're going to be forced to get vaccines. So you have all of this is going to affect where people decide to live, because they're probably, people that don't want to get vaccines and don't want to wear a mask, they're not going to live in school districts that are demanding it, right? School districts are a big portion of what makes somebody want to move to a certain area. So that's going to affect your rentals. That's going to affect your home prices. And then you look at things like this, like you have inflation going up, rents keep going up. You have cost of food is going up, cost of living is going up, wages somewhat are going up, but not enough. People are feeling wealthier, but they're not really doing the math. That's like, you're not that much wealthier.
No.
You know what I mean? You're, just because they bumped you up to $15, everything else has gotten so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We're still seeing more problems with oil. We didn't get to it today, but I mean, there were just issues with oil everywhere, and people are blaming Biden because he shut down the pipeline on
Keystone.
The Keystone pipeline.
Yeah.
They're like, what do you expect? You shut down pipeline, you shut down all these things, and you say, why don't we have enough oil to bring the prices down? Right. And it's like, and then OPEC is playing the games of like, we're just not going to release that much oil. Yeah. So gas prices, that affects transportation, that affects the goods, the shortage of goods that we're having, shortage of truck drivers. People, if they're being forced, they're not going to go to work. And I mean,
fun times.
Yeah, all of these things, you put them together and it's like, okay, as an investor, what does that data mean? Right? As an investor, where am I going to invest? What am I going to do? So hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. Like I said, this afternoon, we're going to be going to one of our properties. So, and we do this, we try to do this quite regularly. So if you want to join us on one of our property tours and you're in San Antonio, make sure to text property tour to 210-794-9898. Give us a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. And as an announcement, we will be taking off until September from doing Coffee with the Johns. We have a lot on our plate, a lot of things that we're working on, that we're building. We're bringing a lot of cool things to you guys. We're going to have a lot of nice surprises, some big news to share with you guys when we do come back for a little changes for Coffee with the Johns. So stay tuned for that. If you want to be alerted of any news, anything that's happening, because we still look at them, we look at them for ourselves. Again, join the text community. Just text CWTJ, Coffee with the Johns, to 210-794-9898. And throughout these next couple of weeks, as important headlines and stuff like that, I'm going to be sharing our thoughts just to that community. So if you want to hear that, make sure you join our community. With that being said, guys, I hope you have an amazing weekend, an amazing rest of your summer, and we will see you all in September.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.